This is the image they said we would never see. For a decade, Donald Trump has been the Teflon Don. Impeachments bounced off him. Indictments boosted his poll numbers. Civil judgments were delayed, appealed, and bonded away. He seemed to live in a reality where consequences were for other people, where the normal rules of law and finance simply did not apply to him. But this morning, Saturday, January 24th, 2026, the Teflon just melted. Breaking news out of New York City has plunged the American presidency into a state of absolute chaos, and the implications extend far beyond politics into the very fabric of American governance and the rule of law. A New York State Supreme Court justice has just issued an order for the immediate execution of judgment against the Trump Organization. This is not a threat. This is not a warning. This is not a negotiating tactic or a legal maneuver designed to pressure a settlement. This is a seizure order. As we speak, the New York City Sheriff's Office, the agency responsible for enforcing civil judgments in the city, is reportedly preparing to serve foreclosure notices on some of the most iconic properties in the Trump portfolio. We are talking about 40 Wall Street. We are talking about the Trump Tower commercial spaces. We are arguably talking about the private jet, the bank accounts, and every other asset that can be legally attached to satisfy the massive civil fraud judgment. If you find this video helpful, please hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and give it a like so you never miss important updates delivered straight to your smartphone. Now let us get into the video. Why now? Why when he is sitting in the Oval Office as the most powerful person in the world? Because the financial contagion we talked about yesterday, the Japan bond crash that sent shockwaves through global markets, has claimed its first high-profile victim, the bonding agency that was securing Trump's massive civil fraud appeal. The liquidity crisis in Tokyo caused a margin call in New York. The insurer pulled the bond. Trump, cash-strapped from the campaign, and the ongoing legal wars that have drained hundreds of millions from his coffers, could not replace it in the 24-hour emergency window given by the court. The stay is lifted. The shield is down. For the first time in American history, a sitting president is facing the active liquidation of his private business empire by a hostile state government. The Secret Service is currently in a standoff with local law enforcement regarding access to these buildings. The White House counsel is screaming for the Supreme Court to intervene on emergency grounds, and the president is reportedly apoplectic, threatening to federalize the National Guard to protect his property from seizure by New York authorities. We are watching the collision of capitalism, the Constitution, and the crash in real time. In this special report, we are going to break down exactly how this happened and the chain of events that led to this unprecedented moment. We are going to look at the assets on the chopping block and what they are actually worth in this distressed environment. We are going to explain why the Japan shock made this inevitable and how global financial interconnection created this perfect storm. And we are going to answer the question that constitutional scholars are debating right now: can New York State actually evict the President of the United States from his own tower? To understand why the sheriff is moving today, we have to understand the financial plumbing that failed last night. Remember the $464 million civil fraud judgment from 2024? The one brought by New York Attorney General Letitia James after a lengthy trial that exposed decades of financial manipulation. Trump appealed it, as everyone expected he would. To stop the seizure of his assets while the appeal played out through the court system, he had to post a bond. A surety company stepped in, vouched for him, and put up the guarantee that allowed the appeal to proceed without immediate asset seizure. For 2 years, that bond held. It was the dam holding back the floodwaters that threatened to engulf his entire business empire. But yesterday, the global financial system shook in ways we have not seen since 2008. The Japanese bond market crashed with unprecedented violence. The yen carry trade unwound as investors scrambled to cover their positions. Trillions of dollars in liquidity evaporated from the global banking system in a matter of hours. It turns out, according to leaked reports from the Wall Street Journal and confirmed by multiple financial sources, the reinsurance consortium backing Trump's appeal bond was heavily exposed to Japanese commercial debt. When Tokyo collapsed, their balance sheet imploded. Late Friday night, regulators or the company's own risk committee forced a de-risking event. They informed the New York court that they could no longer secure the Trump judgment. They withdrew the bond. Usually a defendant gets 30 days to find a new bond under normal circumstances. The courts generally allow reasonable time for a party to secure alternative arrangements. But this is New York. This is Letitia James, who has pursued this case with relentless determination. And this is a judge who has lost all patience with what the court perceives as delay tactics and procedural games. The court ruled that given the precarious nature of the defendant's liquidity and the global financial instability that makes future bonding increasingly uncertain, no grace period would be granted. The logic was brutal but legally sound. If the president is truly worth billions, as he has claimed for years, he can write a check and satisfy the judgment immediately. If he cannot write a check, then the assets must be secured now before they lose value in the crashing market, and before they can be hidden or transferred. The order was signed at 9 a.m. this morning. Immediate seizure. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, effectively got a margin call on his life's work, and he could not meet it. The man who built his entire identity on being a winner, on being wealthy beyond imagination, on being someone who could not be touched by ordinary rules, is now facing the same fate as countless ordinary Americans who have lost their homes and businesses to judgments they could not satisfy. So, what does Letitia James take? She does not want the golf courses. They are hard to sell in this market, losing money operationally and full of legal complications, including environmental issues and membership disputes. She wants the cash flow. She wants the trophy assets that can be sold quickly and that carry the symbolic weight of destroying the Trump brand in New York. Target 1 is 40 Wall Street, known as the Trump Building. This is the crown jewel of the liquidation list. It is a massive skyscraper in the financial district, one of the tallest buildings in Lower Manhattan. But here is the catch that makes this complicated. Trump does not own the land. He owns the ground lease, which is a long-term lease on the property that allows him to operate and profit from the building without owning the underlying real estate. Ground leases are tricky legal instruments. If you default on debt or judgments, the lease can be voided or sold to satisfy creditors. Taking 40 Wall Street hits Trump where it hurts most deeply. His identity as a New York mogul, as a titan of Manhattan real estate, depends on these trophy properties. It is valuable. It is liquid relatively compared to other real estate assets, and it is symbolic of everything he claims to be. Target 2 is Trump Tower, specifically the commercial and retail spaces that occupy the lower floors of the building. Not the penthouse yet. That raises additional complications we will discuss. But the bottom floors, the Gucci store, the atrium that has been the backdrop for so many famous moments, the office space that houses the Trump Organization headquarters. The sheriff can appoint a receiver for these commercial spaces. This is a court-appointed CEO who takes over management of the building and its operations. Imagine this scenario playing out in real time. A bureaucrat appointed by a Democrat attorney general walking into Trump Tower, firing the Trump Organization management, and redirecting all the rent checks from the commercial tenants directly to the state of New York to satisfy the judgment. The president would still own it on paper, technically maintaining his ownership interest. But he would lose control of day-to-day operations. He would lose the cash flow that sustains his lifestyle. He would essentially become a tenant in his own building, watching others run the property that bears his name. Target 3 is the Seven Springs Estate in Westchester County, New York. This is the property that was at the heart of the fraud case, where prosecutors demonstrated that Trump had wildly inflated its value for tax and loan purposes. It is low-hanging fruit for seizure. It is not his primary home. It is not protected by homestead exemptions. It is an investment property that can be seized and sold without the complications that attach to a personal residence. Target 4 is the most immediate threat of all, the bank accounts. The sheriff can send a levy to every bank in New York. JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Citibank, every major financial institution. Any account with the name Trump Organization gets frozen immediately. The money is siphoned out to pay the judgment. If this happens on a Monday morning payroll run, Trump Organization employees do not get paid. The maids at the hotels, the doormen at Trump Tower, the executives in the corporate suite, their checks bounce. That is how you kill a company in 24 hours. You cut off its access to cash and watch it suffocate. This is where the situation moves from financial crisis to constitutional crisis. Trump Tower is not just an office building. It is the private residence of the President of the United States. It is a fortress with security measures that rival the White House. The Secret Service controls the perimeter around the building. They control the elevators that access the upper floors. They control the airspace above Fifth Avenue. The sheriff of New York City is a law enforcement officer. He has a court order signed by a judge commanding him to enter the premises and inventory assets for seizure. So what happens when the sheriff walks up to the revolving doors on Fifth Avenue with that court order in hand? The scenario unfolds like this. The sheriff approaches the entrance to Trump Tower. A Secret Service agent stands in the way, blocking access. "Sir, you cannot enter. This is a secure zone protecting the National Command Authority. The president's security cannot be compromised." The sheriff responds, "I have a warrant to seize this property pursuant to a valid court order. I am legally entitled to enter and execute this judgment." The agent says, "Federal law supersedes state law. For security reasons, access is denied. You will have to take this up with federal authorities." This is a standoff. Guns are present on both sides. Egos are massive. The potential for violence, or at least for a constitutional crisis that makes everything else look minor, is very real. The Attorney General anticipates this confrontation. That is why they are likely targeting the commercial entities first. You do not need to go into the penthouse to seize the bank accounts of the LLC that owns the penthouse. You do not need to physically enter the residential floors to take control of the commercial spaces below. But the optics of this situation are devastating regardless of the specific tactics employed. Imagine the news footage of New York State officials pasting seized stickers on the windows of the Gucci store in the lobby of the president's home. It is a humiliation ritual, and it is designed to provoke a reaction. It is designed to show the world that even the most powerful man on the planet is not above the law. If Trump orders the Secret Service to physically block the sheriff from executing a legal civil order on a commercial business that has nothing to do with presidential security, he is getting into obstruction of justice territory. He is using federal power to prevent the execution of a valid state court order. That is a crime. But Trump will argue that they are trying to bankrupt the president to stop him from governing. This is a coup by other means, carried out not through bullets, but through balance sheets. Sources inside the White House describe the mood as nuclear. Remember, Trump views his net worth as his soul. He views his buildings as his children, perhaps more fondly than his actual children in some cases. To him, this is not a legal dispute about money. It is a personal violation of everything he has built over 50 years. He is reportedly on the phone constantly with his new attorney general, demanding that the Department of Justice intervene on his behalf. He wants the DOJ to file an emergency injunction in federal court, arguing that a sitting president is immune from civil asset seizure while in office. This is a novel legal theory that has never been tested because no president has ever faced this situation. The Supreme Court ruled in Clinton versus Jones that a president can be sued civilly while in office, but can he be evicted from his own property? Can his business be liquidated while he is trying to run the country? The argument will be distraction. Your Honor, the president cannot negotiate the Greenland Treaty or solve the Japan crisis if he is worried about his furniture being auctioned off on eBay. This is an undue burden on the executive branch that impairs his ability to fulfill his constitutional duties. This is the unitary executive theory taken to its financial extreme. He is essentially arguing that his wallet and the national treasury are functionally linked because his attention is a national asset that cannot be diverted by personal legal problems. But the Japan crisis makes this argument weaker, not stronger. the public is seeing their 401k accounts drop precipitously. They are seeing inflation eating away at their savings. They are seeing their own financial security threatened by global events. If the president says stop everything and save my golf course while ordinary Americans suffer, the political optics are suicidal. This connects back to every poll showing declining support. If he uses the power of the presidency to save his own fortune while the country suffers, he loses the populist mantle forever. He becomes exactly what his critics always said he was, a rich man using power for personal gain. Usually, when a billionaire gets in a liquidity crunch, he makes a phone call. He calls a Saudi prince. He calls a Wall Street friend. He calls a hedge fund manager. Loan me $500 million for 6 months. I am good for it. Here is some collateral. But today is Saturday, January 24th, 2026. The markets are broken. The Japanese banks are pulling cash home to shore up their own balance sheets. The American banks are terrified of regulatory blowback and the crashing bond market. The Saudi money might not be available because oil prices are volatile due to recession fears. Donald Trump is toxic collateral right now. Who wants to lend $500 million to a president who is at war with the courts, whose assets are being actively seized, and who might be impeached or removed if events continue on this trajectory? The risk premium is simply too high. No rational financial actor would take this bet. This is why the immediate seizure order is so deadly. The judge knows Trump is illiquid. The judge knows the Japan shock froze the credit markets globally. They struck at the exact moment of maximum vulnerability. It is a coordinated financial decapitation strike, whether by design or by the alignment of circumstances. Let us get technical about what a court-appointed receiver actually does, because this is the specific legal mechanism that will dismantle the Trump organization from the inside out. In New York law, under CPLR Article 52, a judge can appoint a receiver to administer the property of a judgment debtor. This is not just a monitor who watches what happens. This is a replacement for the owner with full operational authority. The receiver has the power to collect rents. All the tenants in 40 Wall Street, the law firms, the businesses get a letter. Do not pay Trump. Pay the receiver. Any payment to the Trump organization will not satisfy your lease obligation. The receiver has the power to manage operations. The receiver decides who cleans the floors, who works security, and who gets fired. They can fire the Trump children if they are on the payroll, and there is nothing the Trump family can do about it. The receiver has the power to sell the asset. If the cash flow is not enough to pay the judgment, the receiver can list the building for sale. Imagine the psychological warfare of this scenario. Eric Trump or Don Jr. show up to work at Trump Tower on Monday morning. The receiver, a court-appointed lawyer, likely someone with no loyalty to the Trump brand, calls them into a conference room and says, "Hand over your keys. You are relieved of your duties." They cannot call Dad to fix this. Dad cannot do anything. The receiver answers only to the judge. This is a hostile takeover sanctioned by the state of New York. It turns the Trump organization into a zombie entity that exists solely to pay Letitia James and satisfy the judgment. And because these are private companies, LLCs, and other corporate structures, the corporate veil piercing that occurred in the fraud trial allows this personal liability to attach. The Trump brand becomes effectively a tenant of the state of New York, operating at the pleasure of a court-appointed bureaucrat. Here is the other shoe that drops. Real estate is built on debt. Trump has loans on these buildings, hundreds of millions of dollars owed to various lenders. Almost every commercial loan has a covenant or a clause called bad boy guarantees or judgment defaults. It says if you get a massive civil judgment against you that you cannot pay, or if your assets are seized by legal process, you are technically in default on the mortgage. Even if Trump is current on his monthly mortgage payments, the seizure order itself can trigger a default. If the lenders declare default, they can call the loan immediately. Pay us the full $100 million now. Trump does not have it. So the banks foreclose on top of the state, seizing the equity. It becomes a feeding frenzy. The state wants the equity to satisfy the judgment. The bank wants the principal to protect its loan. The asset gets torn apart between competing creditors, and in a Japan crash environment where everyone is desperate for liquidity, the banks are not going to be lenient. They want their cash back to shore up their own balance sheets. They will accelerate the loans immediately to protect themselves. This is the domino effect of asset seizure. One card falls and the whole tower comes down. How does this play in different segments of the American public? The MAGA base sees this as theft. They see this as communism. They are stealing his buildings. Expect rallies outside Trump Tower. Expect donations to the Legal Defense Fund to spike, although $464 million is hard to raise from $50 donations. This solidifies the narrative that the system is trying to destroy him. It creates a martyrdom complex that is incredibly powerful politically. The independents represent the danger zone. Americans like winners. There is a psychology to wealth that Trump has exploited his entire career. Part of Trump's appeal was, I am rich, I cannot be bought. I am successful, I will make you successful. If he is broke, if his buildings are seized, if he is viewed as a deadbeat who cannot pay his debts, the aura of competence shatters completely. He cannot even manage his own bond. How can he manage the economy? Combined with every other crisis hitting simultaneously, this paints a picture of a collapsing administration. The donors are running for the exits. The big money, the billionaires who backed him in 2024, are reassessing their positions. They see the asset seizure as the final straw. They do not want their names attached to a sinking ship. The invisible primary for 2028 starts today. Other Republican politicians are watching this and thinking he is done. He is financially ruined and politically toxic. It is time to move on and position for the next cycle. So, how does this end legally? It ends at the Supreme Court, as so many things do in this era. Trump's team will file an emergency stay request. The Trump-aligned 6-3 conservative majority has to decide. Do they step in? Do they issue a ruling saying state courts cannot seize the assets of a sitting president? If the receiver sells 40 Wall Street next week, what is it worth? In better times, it was valued at maybe 200 or 300 million optimistically. But in 2026, commercial real estate in New York City is already hurting from remote work trends that emptied office buildings. Interest rates just spiked because of the Japan crisis. And everyone knows it is a forced sale by a distressed seller. It is a fire sale. Vulture funds and foreign sovereign wealth funds will come in and offer pennies on the dollar. We will give you $50 million for the lease. Take it or leave it. The receiver might have to take it because something is better than nothing. So Trump loses the building, but the sale price does not even cover the judgment. He loses the asset and still owes the money. He gets stripped clean and stays in debt. This is the brutality of forced liquidation in a bear market. It destroys equity. That is all we have for this bulletin. U.S. Immigration Info Channel provides all necessary visa information and procedures for your U.S. immigration journey. It is important to understand the United States immigration processing steps, visa application requirements, processing times, forms, fees, and more. We will continue to provide all information about U.S. visitor visas such as B1 and B2, work visas such as L1A, L1B, and H1B, student visas, green cards, immigrant visas, EB1, EB2, EB3, EB4, and EB5, and family immigrant visas. If you have not already, please subscribe to U.S. Immigration Info Channel. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.